good morning, good day, y'all. My name is William Hill, forward deployed engineer here at Render ATL. It's my pleasure to host our next iteration of our speaker series. And today with us, we have David vonThenen. I'm very excited to have this conversation with David today. David, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Yeah, by the way, that's an awesome intro. I love
that. Shout out to our marketing team for putting together that intro. That was, yeah, just again, a little bit of the energy that you will get while attending Render ATL. So, and it's our pleasure to have David as one of our speakers this year at Render. So I'll do a quick introduction of David so we can get into some of the really insightful things he has to say. So David vonThenen is a senior AI and ML engineer at NetApp, a seasoned keynote speaker, and an open source contributor with deep expertise in agentic AI, deep learning, RAG architectures, and cloud native systems. His career has taken him from hardware and firmware and storage drivers to Kubernetes, to conversational AI, to building ML systems that help classify diseases. That's a real pivot story. If you want a grounded, no hype take on where AI is going and a career that keeps evolving, David is your guy, and we are happy to have him on the stream today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be talking about all this. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. So again, we kind of talked about it. It's in the title for the people who joined, and even some of the bio. You've had quite the career pivot, expanding a lot of different spaces within tech. So you were kind of sound like you started out on the hardware side, and then you kind of move into like the, I guess, say distributed system side, and now you're in like the agentic AI side. So looking back and knowing what you know now, as far as like each time you reinvented yourself, how did you know when it was time to like reinvent yourself versus doubling down on where you already were?
Yeah, I mean, I think about that quite a bit, and I think honestly, it comes down to like listening to what other people have to say. Just like having really smart people around you, and just kind of taking finger to the pulse to find out like what's happening in the industry, and then kind of like when you feel that swell of attention and focus and all that stuff, then it's kind of like, hey, I should really go pay attention to this. And that's kind of, I think, what how I've really kind of shaped like my pivots, and going from firmware hardware to virtualization to Kubernetes to AI. And I think miraculously, I think I've hit all of those just before the hype cycle got really crazy. So I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by really intelligent people and just like listening, right?
Oh, so getting in the door early sounds like you're key.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, even like Kubernetes was a big shift for me. I think I got in at around when Kubernetes was like 1.05, so really, really early. Before, and there were other competitors in the space, believe it or not. But yeah, it was, and at that time I also kind of had pivoted from, the 9 to 5 cubicle, heads down, working to having that shift in DevRel, going into the DevRel space. Yeah.
I have 2 follow-up questions to that, because that's interesting as far as you were saying, like listening to other people and stuff, right? There's so much noise out there. How do you know who to listen to as far as like those people that's kind of help guide you along? How did you sift through all that noise and get to the real signal? And then second part of that question is, how did you then go about, building those skills? I know you already had like a base level of knowledge, having worked in like hardware, firmware and such, but then how did you build those skills to shift over to like the Kubernetes side and then so on and so forth and all the different pivots that you had?
Yeah, for the first part, I think, listen to what people have to say, right? Like, that's why like Render is a great place. Go to conferences, listen to what people are saying. But everyone has their own experience. And so you kind of have to put it through that kind of filter. And like, what are you interested in? What kind of ecosystem are you involved in? Where do you see yourself in, if you have to do a pivot, right? So a lot of it is, like just listening to people, going to conferences like Render, checking out LinkedIn, seeing what people are saying, and then kind of like putting your own take and your own spin on it based on your own experience, right? So I think that's a huge part of it, as you have your own filter, you have your own reasoning, and your own judgment, and kind of build on that, and use your judgment and kind of say, hey, is this something that would be interesting to me? And if so, like what would I be interested in doing in that space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then yeah, say that if you could elaborate on the second part of that question, like how did you go about like building these new skills? Like what was your method for doing that?
Yeah, and for like building the skill set, every time, it always, some of it's like listening, right? Listening and trying new things. Don't be afraid to experiment, right?
Mhm.
I think every time I had the pivot moment, uh, you really do get knocked down and you're starting over, right, in this new
Mhm.
technology space. And I know that can be very frightening, but I think there's something to be said for getting your hands dirty, actually giving it a try. For me, I can read a lot and it'll just go in one ear and out the other. But
Mhm.
until I try it and then, actually put my hands on the technology, try to spin up a container, see what it's all about, what are the benefits, using that kind of judgment and listening to what other people are saying. I need to be really hands-on, and sometimes that hands-on, you succeed and you spin up a container is all great, but then like maybe the networking's not working on it exactly right. And having some of those setbacks are good because it's like it's the way to learn. And kind of my advice would be like, don't be afraid to fail. I mean, surround yourself with people who are smart, who understand that failure is a part of the learning process, and just get your hands dirty, try everything. And so each time I've kind of gone through, whether it's virtualization, containers, or even ML stuff, like on the ML side, I started out, sure, there are models out there that do exactly what I'm trying to do, but even trying to mimic and repetitively like copy something, it's like learning process for me, right? And so even that kind of learning is really important. So just get your hands dirty, try everything, and don't be afraid to fail.
I love that. Yeah, especially now with the barrier of entry of trying things have kind of gotten, lowered at this point. So I absolutely love that just to try a bunch of different stuff. So keeping in the theme of like cutting through the noise and getting to the signal, everybody's talking about agents right now. Like that's a lot where you hear that's where the
Right.
money is flowing. That's where everybody's talking about, whether it's, from individual engineers to corporations, what have you. So again, getting to the actual signal and cutting through the hype. What's something about agentic AI that you think is genuinely exciting? And on the flip side, what's something that you think is being oversold?
Yeah. So maybe I'll tackle the oversold problem
Right.
first, and this might be a hot take for sure.
Uh-oh. Alert.
Yeah, we're gonna get in trouble here. Um, there's, I think the hot take is, these LLMs and the foundation models, they're definitely, the training process is improving, different architectures and
Mhm.
changing. Especially, and definitely, there's something to be said for new training data, like the LLMs are ingesting new training data, so new capabilities. But if you kind of look at the improvements from like one version, like a
Mhm.
5.0 to a 5.1, and especially these days, the improvement in the actual model themselves it's pretty incremental. It's not like this
Mhm.
massive leap. And so that might be my hot take is, hey, the if you just look at the models themselves, they're making improvements, don't get me wrong, and some of them appear to be very huge. But I think the hot take might be, it's token prices are going up with each improvement, but
Mhm.
the improvement is not this massive wave of change, right? Where
Mhm.
on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of cool and interesting stuff to be done around the code around the model. So like that harness
Mhm.
code that you see.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the model improvements, so to speak, are all in that area, right? Improving the harness code around it, improving the interaction, the orchestration, how the LLMs are being called, how they're refining the inputs and the outputs, and
Mhm.
all that stuff. So I think the opposite is the improvement that I think is really kind of exploding at this point is like all that harness code and being able to do the orchestration and meaningfully call LLMs in specific ways, right?
Mhm. Man, you teed that up perfectly because as of like literally tonight, I'm teaching a workshop at Render HQ on harness engineering. So I might have to try to clip that and see if I can use it
For sure,
for
go
folks
for
to
it. It's
visit. All right,
yeah.
checks in the mail.
But it's true, and like I think that's where the value is being added right now. And the really cool part about that, the harness code, all the code around the LLMs, I think everyone can participate in that, right? And that's the cool part, right?
Absolutely. So again, great. So the harness, that's one of those things that you're genuinely excited about. Is like because yeah, I agree. There's gonna be we had that. I think I first became aware of like GPT-3, where it felt like magic, right? Where we can start to get that magical feeling. Where now it's more of like those incremental changes versus us being blown away. I can almost think about it. In a former life, I was a gamer of like graphics, right? Where we used to be so blown away. We look at the jump from like PS1 to PS2 or those different generations. And now it's like these little increment. Oh, we have ray tracing now. It's like unless you know how to look for that,
Right.
it's not gonna be, have that big of effect on you. So yeah, I think that's part of just human nature, and then also just the nature of the growth curve of technology, right? And some of the constraints that we're now starting to hit.
Yeah. And like, I think of like a lot of it is, I think the Claude Code source leak, I think, was the great kind of evidence that you needed to see, right? There was actually a research paper that was done where they analyzed Claude Code itself from the source code leak, and like I think it was like 98% of the code was the code around the language orchestrating it, and so like there's even research to back that up, and so yeah, it's very exciting time and place to be right now.
Yeah. If you have any thoughts to share, like on kind of leading from that as well, it's like open source, and how that's leading in. I know big Kimi 3, K3 was like big in the news and like the past week. So do you have any thoughts on like where the open source models are going?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I think don't like the foundation models are amazing. OpenAI, Gemini, obviously Claude Code and Anthropic. But having said that, I think we'll definitely see at some point a significant increase in price per token at some of these platform providers. And so a lot of the stuff that I try to do in workshops or in labs or whatever is I try to like really focus on open source models and the open weight models, because I think there's real opportunity, both from like I don't want to spend money on tokens, right? If I can land something that's quantized on my laptop and give like the everyday mundane tasks to that first, and then when it has a problem or it doesn't have enough knowledge, then call out to the foundation models, right? I think there's real advantages from cost, privacy, protecting your own data, and running locally that is really untapped at this point. But I think we're starting to see this wave now of believe it or not, a lot of companies considering to use open source and only calling out to these foundation models, when the extreme intelligence and the extreme thinking models are really needed. So I think that's kind of like where you're starting to see that huge shift now.
Yeah, like even like with those kind of passive topics combined, I'm sure it's out there. I just haven't seen it personally, but like even like you said, combining where you almost have that harness to delegate, right? Where the harness can delegate to like a local model, open weight model that's running for more of the simple task and only goes out and spend your tokens on the foundation model when needed. So like I think that's one of those cool things that could be possible with the right harness, right? Is that like it can know which things that it can delegate to, like, all right, I can just run this locally for free versus going and just blowing through, like you said, this increasing cost of tokens with every passing generation.
Yeah, definitely. And so like, I'm definitely huge on, evangelizing and kind of getting the word out from like an open source point of view and like open weights and open models. And so, yeah, I mean, you could even go trolling through my GitHub and you can see some of the past conferences, most of like the code repositories for the past conferences for all my demos, like most of them are surrounded using like local models first, and kind of keeping up with that idea of like privacy and inexpensive models and being able to be self-sufficient and then go call the other model right when things kind of get tough with the other subjects or advanced reasoning, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So got another question around like your career progression. So you've worked on everything from enterprise infrastructure to disease classification models. What's one lesson that you seem to apply, like no matter what technology you're working on? I know you talked a little bit about like try everything. Do you have anything else like, like a structured way that you just, no matter what it is, like this is something that you just apply in your personal process?
Yeah, it's, definitely try everything, and kind of, like when you try something out, you kind of get this weird moment where you're like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, what else
Mhm,
can I apply this to? And so there are a ton of things like in that kind of field where it's like, hey, I, first started like out using the disease classification models. That
mhm,
started out as literally just a project where I'm like, hey, this sounds like an interesting idea. I had a colleague, who's a medical professional,
mhm,
in really concerned and involved with Parkinson's, and kind of just started as a collaboration of like, hey, maybe we could do something like this. And
mhm,
it started out initially as just, hey, let's build a model to, track movement, so people's gait patterns, and
mhm.
you know, be able to identify whether someone has Parkinson's or not through, someone walking in a video. And then it
Wow.
quickly evolved to like, hey, I was really interested in doing speech and text to
Mhm.
speech, speech to text. And I was like, hey, maybe we can build a classification model to detect Parkinson's through speech. And believe it or not, we built it, and it totally does work.
Wow.
And you get these weird things where like, hey, this works for Parkinson's, and I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, this, let's try it for sarcasm. And so I literally then was like, hey, let's take this idea, and if you can do it for Parkinson's, you should be able to detect sarcasm in like TV shows and movies. And
Mhm.
I gave a presentation at AI Dev in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and you can apply these things to different ways, and it's really just kind of cool to see. Once you kind of get an understanding based on, foundation of like what this technology can do, then you start to apply it to a bunch of crazy different ideas, and just seeing where it can go, right?
What an incredible, like, even just journey that is, right? To like just having a curiosity around how something works that then one could potentially help improve the health outcomes of some people, who maybe are early onset with Parkinson's, like again, incredible. And then also, and I would say a trivial use, but a completely different use case, right? Where you're learning those two, that one skill applied across like different things. And I think that's such a powerful thing, right? Where you just let your curiosity run wild and you were able
Mhm.
to basically get really good results across two wildly different use cases.
Yeah, 100%. And I like to think that, no matter whether you have experience in hardware, or maybe training ML models, or doing DevOps related work, I think all of that stuff is very uniquely valuable, and
Mhm.
it can be applied to other ways and other different methods and domains. And it's really just kind of like, taking that experience and like thinking outside of the box, and like, oh, this, helped me in this situation, maybe I can apply it in this situation, right?
Yeah, and I feel like a theme has formed in just this short conversation that we've had is that along with try everything, but trying everything that's like relevant to your interest, right? So I think that's such a cool thing now because, like I said, we're talking about like the advancements in the models, especially the open weight ones, where now you can just have an idea. Like even myself, I've had a video games as a kid is what even got me interested in like computer software and stuff like that. So I've even just like, all right, let me just try stuff, So again, do you have any advice for people out there who would say like, all right, I have this idea, but it feels like that I've never been able to implement it. I need to go hire a developer or something like that, or build out a team. Like, how can they even just scope out how to even just try something that they just have a passing interest in?
Yeah. So yeah, definitely do what you're interested in, because, just your interest alone is going to make you curious about,
Mhm,
and also have that, that kind of natural, like domain knowledge, right? That I'm very interested in music or art, or
mhm,
it doesn't even have to be technology related, right? Like cooking new recipes. And I think, having that base knowledge or that interest kind of really is like a force multiplier for you to like learn even more. And I think one of the real unleveraged or under talked about parts of AI is like, I use AI a lot to like learn.
mhm,
So I ask AI, whether it's Gemini, OpenAI, or Anthropic, or whatever, I ask it questions, and I'm like, hey, if I'm interested in this subject, what are the questions that I should be asking, right? Like,
mhm,
what things do I think, I should know in this particular field or domain? And, I use it as a means of teaching. And then, when I kind of get enough information about a certain subject or domain or the problem I'm trying to solve, then I have more information to phrase the prompt and include the things that I need to include into the prompt to get the AI to do the right thing, right? And then I kind of like focus on the answer, right? Like, hey, AI, can you go and build X, Y, and Z, right? But I think kind of like the underutilized part of AI is that teaching aspect. And I use it quite a bit to like just figure out like what the heck's going on and like what things I should be interested in, or what things that I think I know that I do know or don't know, and I think it's a good teaching tool, right?
Yeah, and you may have actually just answered one of the last questions I had, which was, if you had a developer's attention for like 5 minutes, what would be one misconception you would want to clear up around AI? Because again, various themes that's formed throughout this conversation. One of those is like getting the signal from the noise. So like, again, a lot of people had a lot of misconceptions around what is possible, what isn't. And I totally agree around the educational part. So is there any other misconception that you would, hey, bang the table or anything like that to try to clear up around, just in a conversation with another developer?
Yeah, definitely use AI to teach yourself. Have it interview you, right? Have it, if you have a particular problem, turn the AI around and say, ask me the questions and figure out what I need to ask in order for the AI to, understand the problem or the domain or, what challenge you're trying to solve. I think that's one of the underutilized areas in AI. And then, with that knowledge, right? Like knowledge is power, right? And, that's why I'm all about, trying to push as much information out there, take home code and try it yourself, make the mistakes. I think all of that's great. And because you learn, you get a better understanding and appreciation of like a particular problem or domain. And, the other aspect is AI is kind of like this force multiplier of like the knowledge that you have, right? I think everyone's experienced, especially early on, when they're using AI, they give it a particular prompt and they ask it to answer a particular question, and you kind of get this really generic answer. And I think putting more of your knowledge into that prompt in the beginning gets you a much better answer, right? You start to give it the guardrails and say, do this, don't do this. I want it to do X, Y, and Z. Maybe even define like the functions and the classes and say, I want this, this particular Python file with this particular class in it. But the more knowledge that you have, the better you can define the problem. And then in turn, it'd be like a 100,000x multiplier in the better answer that you're going to get from AI in the end. So that would be my take on everything, is always learn, make the mistakes, be resourceful, take a look around at what's happening around you, and then applying it to, to how you can use the AI as that kind of like force multiplier in that teaching tool, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's wonderful, wonderful insight. And I know I've gotten just personally good insight from this conversation, and I hope the audience has as well. So man, David, again, thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge, your expertise. Can you give us a little sneak preview of the talk that you'll be doing at Render this year?
Yeah, definitely.
You have to give away everything. Don't give away everything, but just a little sneak preview.
Yeah. So the session title is "The Sound of Your Secrets," and it's actually building out an acoustic keystroke logger. So traditional keystroke logger is you install software on a laptop, it intercepts the key presses, and then you can kind of like create a journal of like what you're typing. But the idea is, instead of installing any software, is use a microphone to use machine learning to understand the sound it makes when you press a particular letter, and then taking that sound and classifying like A, B, C, D kind of a thing. And so the session is literally going to build that and kind of talk about things that you should be aware of and different ways to protect yourself, and just kind of like, again, putting that technology out there, making people aware of it, and that you can do some pretty amazing and scary things. But I think it's really important that people know that you can do this kind of stuff, and also put the code out there, which I am going to do, because it's important to have it in order to disrupt that kind of stuff, right? Come up with different ideas. And so that's kind of like what the session's going to be about.
That sounds amazing. I hope my talk is not scheduled at the same time because I would love to attend that session because that sounds super, super cool. So again, David, thank you. Where can folks find you in the meantime, leading up into the conference and after the conference?
Yeah, definitely. You can find my socials are just David vonThenen at LinkedIn, Blue Sky. All my socials are just David on my GitHub handle. Definitely can reach out. My calendar is actually, believe it or not, it's always open if anyone's interested in talking beforehand, after, about any questions, AI, not AI related. Calendar's open. You can literally book a meeting, and happy to chat. I've chatted with a ton of people, everything from like career advice to how can I help my startup. And yeah, I love chatting with people, helping people out, and my calendar's always open. So feel free to, just jump in there and book something.
Yes, I encourage people to go and have a chat with David because, again, this has been very enlightening and enjoyable for me. So I want to say thank you once again. Enjoy your time. I know you say you're traveling right now, so enjoy your time at the Big Apple. And thank you once again. And we look forward to seeing you in Atlanta. And for those who are tuning in, we hope to see you at Render ATL as well, happening August 12th and 13th. So coming up really fast. So we hope to see you there. And we'll be happy to see you and have a good time. Peace.